Good. I think we are live. Welcome, everybody. Arvin, Konstantin, thanks a lot for joining us on another Meet the Maker session today. These conversations are all about sharing experience and information about building on Bitcoin and Lightning. And that's why we invite developers, but also designers and content creators to join us here. But especially, we also invite any listener to ask questions so that we can keep these sessions interactive. So just drop a question on Twitter. We stream it there. Drop a question on YouTube where we also stream it. Because after all, I think it's great. It's a great chance to learn from each other. And today we have Arvin as our guest. He's a developer at Galoy. They are building a Bitcoin native banking platform. And we have Konstantin. He is the creator of Kollider, what is a trading platform for Bitcoin built on Lightning. And both companies are offering also Bitcoin-backed synthetic stablecoins. And I guess we have had quite an interesting discussions all around these topics and their experiences, because we just recently actually learned that both of them met each other at the Lightning conference in Berlin. I think it was 2019, so quite some time ago. And since then, they probably collected quite some experience when it comes to building on Bitcoin and Lightning. Over to you, Konstantin. Can you tell us a bit about your background and the first touch points in Lightning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I touched crypto before I touched Lightning. So I didn't come into the space immediately into Lightning. Right out of the gates, when I finished my degree, I started working in a cryptocurrency firm, and they were just making markets across pretty much any sort of exchange in cryptocurrency. And back then I was more interested in the trading part, to be honest. So that excited me, but quite quickly I sort of realized so what was wrong with just general traditional finance and also a bit of crypto, because basically we were touching both, right? We were moving fiat and we were moving crypto in large scales. So just realized this is it's just inefficient. It doesn't work really well. On the fiat side, you had capital controls, you weren't able to move money in amounts and the speed that you wanted to, across countries. Sort of on an institutional level. On the crypto side, it was just super slow. You're moving Bitcoin took free confirmation was at an hour. Or some exchanges also had some sort of they only withdrew once a day, and that probably was just because it was just really clunky to use, and it was just on both ends it was really bad experience. And so that sort of made me realize there needs to be, in order for this to actually take off, there needs to be one improved user experience on this, and two, it needs to be much faster. Even crypto needs to be these transactions that they did, they needed to be much faster. And the reason I sort of went down on Bitcoin is because Bitcoin was pretty much the best or most adopted asset then, institutional wise. People were trading that on large scale, and now even now I think it's pretty much the most traded asset out there, and probably the most stable one as well. It was very sort of practically thinking, and I was thinking how is there anything that makes crypto Bitcoin faster? And then back then they just actually I don't know how long the line that was around, but it was very small then, and just sort of realized that that's around, and actually that can improve this whole payment speed quite dramatically. And I think then it was sort of this is pretty much the way to go. This would pretty much solve the problems all that this firm I was working for had, in terms of capital efficiency and yada, yada, yada. So I thought, just, might as well spend my time building some infrastructure for companies like that, and start exploring Lightning. And now I'm here, that's pretty much it. Obviously there happen a lot of things happen in the meantime, in terms of, sort of with the problems I sort of hit along the way, there's obviously this was very like on the capital markets first world problem kind of end. Like it wasn't, obviously there's a lot of other problems that it solves, but I guess this was my initial sort of spark where I thought like, yeah, I mean this there's purpose, that needs to like work in order, for finance to progress. So, but yeah, so this is how I got started. So it was very practical thinking from like, okay, there was a problem. How can I solve it? What's the technologies out there? What's sort of like a technology that's probably like very likely to continue to exist in the future? And so that was just, Bitcoin and Lightning. So it just made sense to me. And this is how it went. Now I'm here.
Interesting. What about you, Arvin? What fascinates you about Lightning?
Okay, so I guess I came at it from sort of a practical place as well, but like from a kind of a different perspective. So I'm based in the Caribbean, and I guess transferring money is not a solved problem here. We have lots of different currencies across different islands, and we usually have to settle to USD and go through correspondent banks, and it's online payments are a pain. Sending money anywhere is a pain. So yeah, I guess I kind of found Bitcoin from that angle, from that lens of being able to, I guess, work around some of these systems that aren't friendly to countries in this region. And I guess, so I found Lightning while looking at Bitcoin, I guess pretty early. Like I remember playing, like I've been dabbling with it at the edges for quite some time now. I'm not really developing in it directly, but like I remember buying testnet coffees on the Eclair. There's some website that they had quite a while back when Eclair was first launched. And then I remember when like the mainnet versions of it came out, and the network was super small. I remember there was that graph where you could literally count all the nodes in the network. It was like, it looks like, I don't know if you remember that really old ARPANET diagram, but like the whole internet was like one page. It felt like that with Lightning now, and now it's totally different. But yeah, like I think what fascinated me about it was just like the novel way that it used Bitcoin as sort of a base layer settlement system type thing to build something on top of it that sort of gets around some of the restrictions of the base layer. And yeah, I guess one thing led to another, and I ended up working directly in it eventually, and I guess that's where I am now.
Yeah. How come that? Like, can you describe a bit like what was the journey from discovering Lightning until like having a full-time position at Galoy?
Yeah, so it started off with me just playing with like the apps and stuff. I got into some of the node projects pretty early. I think I was dabbling with nodes and stuff before like Umbrel and Raspberry Blitz and stuff were even things. Like there was a guy in I think he was based in Chiang Mai at the time, Damien Me, who was just publishing, hey, like I figured out how to run a node on a Raspberry Pi. Somebody else should try this. So like I was kind of playing with things from those days. And then eventually that evolved into like more like user-facing research, researching, I guess, just the UX of Lightning. And I think at the time it was quite new for developers, and it wasn't always super intuitive how you would integrate it or make use of it and stuff. So I spent some time doing some of those things. And around that, like I'd say like a year ago. So this is still in me kind of just doing like random, like sort of drive-by contributions to different repos and just playing at the edges. At the time, I started to look into, it's not really quite a Bitcoin thing, but I was looking into how to do neobanks in the Caribbean, just because, again, that's like a persistent problem still. And I came across Galoy as sort of this Bitcoin banking platform, which I thought was cool because they were doing so many things I was looking at, but they had this really nice Bitcoin angle to it. And that sort of attracted me to it. So I started to look into the project, started to contribute open source. It's a totally open source code base. So started to just contribute in there and learn about it and stuff. And one thing led to the other, and I ended up joining them. So yeah, it's kind of how I went from dabbling and just random contributions here and there to jumping in full time.
we should maybe talk a bit also a bit later, but about these random contributions, because maybe that's also a way for any other developer to get into this ecosystem a bit. But like, yeah, Konstantin, what about you? Did you like immediately start with Kollider, or was there also some experimentation in between?
Yeah, it was lots of experimentation. So actually, I remember our first product that we built had nothing to do with trading. It was actually a data labeling service that used Lightning to pay people to label images. Because actually my background is machine learning and AI, and so that's what I studied. So I, even though I came out of this finance job, I was like, well, payments, that's pretty cool. Maybe start with like customer facing product rather than having to deal with other big, trading firms. So basically, what we're trying to test is whether people are into micropayments with this, because I mean, the idea was just we used this labeling model that was pretty state of the art back then, which basically enabled you to make some sort of like very rough outline, and then we'll do the rest for you in terms of labeling. It was sort of a unsupervised learning technique. But anyway, so we were paying people for like every time they made a label, they would get some sats, and we were just thinking like would people do that, and we kind of realized quite quickly is that these were like really like two very niche things combined. Like people that would label data, they probably wouldn't know about Lightning, or it would be not usable to them. And also it was just like people didn't really care about like very small amounts. So basically we were just testing whether like micropayments are sort of like I don't know, like popular. Yeah, I don't know. We did test this, and then I don't know, we didn't really get anywhere with this, so we kind of scrapped that idea. Although I thought it was a really cool product. And then we started, basically focusing on something that we know more about, which was obviously finance, trading and stuff. And then we built like a very simple like spread betting sort of interface, which was not like an exchange. It was just like you can make a bet with someone else about the price. And yeah, we did that. And then, I think, I don't know why, I think we sort of realized is that the problem with this is, again, like people don't necessarily need to want to do that, like in a very small, again, it was more basically, again, like it was focused on like very small payments. And, people weren't necessarily, they didn't care about like very small amounts that much. For that application as well, like trading. So if they want to trade, they want to like trade size. And so yeah, we kind of like come to the terms like, in order for this to work, we actually have to build like a proper like exchange where people can basically trade whatever amounts they want, and make it very similar to what already exists, in order to kind of ease in the users into this new idea of using Lightning rather than just throwing something completely different at them. So it was sort of the journey that we went down. But yeah, like it was, I mean, compared to Arvin, it was very like product driven. Like we were only thinking about products most of the time. Like we were thinking like, how do we get, this technology into as many hands as possible? And again, like trading is probably one of the most popular things to do in crypto. Like if there's any application that's like used very like a lot, and that's trading. So we thought, well, that's a good starting point. Let's just, try to create what already exists, but with Lightning, kind of de-risk that. And so, yeah, that's how we sort of what we narrowed down on, and this is how sort of we then build. And yeah, I think this is sort of it. And now we obviously branch out a little bit away from just trading, obviously thinking about more payments and more of the stuff that is probably like what Arvin mentions, like actual sort of like problems that you could solve with this technology. Because trading is obviously it's needed as a backbone, but the things that enables is not necessarily very obvious to people. But it can enable other financial sort of like instruments or like abilities for people. But yeah, so this is sort of what was the journey. Very product driven, quite a bit of experimentation with different ideas. Yeah.
And like, and now you came up with this with a new wallet also, like for stable coins. And this is somewhat the result of your experience that you had with your users on Kollider, or what was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so I think like looking at the Lightning ecosystem, I think a lot of people, especially at this stage, they use Lightning for payments, right? I mean, this is sort of the prime use case for Lightning. And like I said, on the trading side, I think, obviously this is the idea that the exchange, the base idea of the exchange is obviously minimizing the counterparty risk by allowing people to never deposit more than is required, which is sort of a bit of a paradigm change of like the way you interact with exchanges, where you make it as easy as possible for people to just take their money out of them, and people will probably do it. So that's obviously the idea, like minimizing counterparty risk. And I mean, that works, and that could also work on a large scale. And it doesn't necessarily, so the Lightning-based Lightning enables that user experience. And that's great. And then we're basically thinking, okay, well, that makes sense, but like, what are people right now in this space mostly doing with Lightning? And that's payments. And sort of naturally, what you can enable with like a derivative exchange and a bunch of payments is obviously a synthetic Bitcoin backed stablecoin. You can make fiat payments happening, by using the exchange as a hedging venue. And it's sort of a very natural synergy between these two things. And we're seeing this obviously as a way to, because all people do is they still sort of trade on the exchange, but through a different user experience. They hold synthetic stablecoins, which is like a short position on an exchange. But it's obviously for something. It's not to speculate or anything, or I guess it is for speculation, but it's more about for in speculation of a price fluctuation. So you kind of hedge against that. So you kind of try to protect yourself from these things to make it more usable. So I think it's a very natural sort of use case for for payments. For just what we see right now, what's going on in Lightning. So this is we kind of arrived at that point. Just by also speaking to users and so the general feedback we've gotten. So quite excited about this.
Cool. But Galoy also provides a service for stable coins, right? You see it also implemented in Bitcoin Beach Wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Like a part of like Arvin, maybe you can shed some light on that. How does this work? And also, what else is Galoy providing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to build on what Konstantin said there about the usefulness of like these sorts of platforms and markets and stuff. From our end, they're massively useful because when you want to construct these kinds of things, these sort of stable instruments, you need two sides to the market. You need a side that wants the stability, wants the hedge, but you need the other side that wants to speculate. So even though like on the surface of it, you look at these platforms and you see people speculating, you think, oh, okay, they're just speculating and trading and whatever. They're providing a very useful function for people like us who need the other side of that trade to do hedging and stuff. So yeah, I guess, okay, so on the on the Galoy side of it, we sort of came to the same place. We've been operating, so we're sort of a technology provider, and the first application of our technology is the Bitcoin Beach wallet. That's been rolled out in El Salvador, started in El Zonte, and now it's kind of across the country. And based on, so we have a bit of a history, like just working with users there and seeing what their needs are and responding to them and stuff. And one of the persistent needs that kept coming up from people who aren't necessarily coming to Bitcoin from the same place that a lot of us would usually come to it from. Like they're just coming to it from a very utilitarian place where they need some sort of digital money to be able to transact, at a distance without having to like take a bus for 3 hours and go to Western Union and be physically exposed to some gang members or something. So it's a very practical use case. And based on us, I guess, meeting this market, what we noticed is that a lot of people, like, Bitcoin is good for saving, Bitcoin is good for long-term things. But if you have very short-term obligations, if you need to make a rent this month or you need to buy food and you're not in a position to have like a huge buffer, a lot of savings, you can't weather the volatility a lot of the times. And that's a very real need for a lot of people that we saw using our platform. And it was a request that kept coming up, like some sort of a facility where we could help them not be exposed to the volatility of Bitcoin, at least in the short term. So yeah, that's kind of, we took it from that perspective. We looked at what the options were. And again, this is working in El Salvador, so not the best banking access, not like the best connections to the rest of the global financial system. So we needed to find a way where we're sort of resilient to traditional ways of kind of finding this stability. And what we landed on was being able to create a synthetic USD instrument using derivatives that aren't necessarily connected to these exchanges in these tricky jurisdictions, tricky regulatory environments. So our first sort of iteration, well, that's where stable sats comes from. It's literally sats that are hedged. And our first iteration was to use the OKX exchange, which is a centralized exchange, where we do have to put Bitcoin on the exchange to be able to execute the hedge. But like right now, I think there's somebody working on a Kollider integration for stable sats. So the way our engine works is that we can use any exchange, we can use any facility that can bring that hedge. And what we'd want to do is, like, OKX is our first facility for that, but eventually we want to make it more robust, right? We want to not be reliant on centralized services as far as possible. We want to be able to sort of use sources that have less custodial risk, and Kollider is sort of a great option for that. So yeah, like I think it fits nicely. We're looking for markets. We're looking for people who can provide these markets in a sort of a true to Bitcoin way, and it sort of just makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of how we came to it.
So how does like stable sats from Galoy differentiate from the stable US dollars of Kollider? Do you also like act, Konstantin, as a layer in between an additional market, or do you really provide the whole liquidity directly, for example, to Galoy?
Okay, so I mean, fundamentally, they're the same things. I mean, they are the same things, but I guess so. I'm not sure whether I answer your question, but like technically they're the same thing, and I think this is the beautiful thing, and also that's what Arvin said, is that in theory anyone can create a stable sat, right? Like all they have to do is to have a connection to a derivative exchange, and then sort of short Bitcoin, whatever fiat they want to short, to stabilize against that fiat. And I think that is the thing. Like you can by since everyone can do it, you don't need any sort of banking infrastructure or fiat rails. You can diversify that way. Like anyone can become an issuer of that stable sat, right? It doesn't matter who it is. And I think the more people do it, the more robust the system gets. And I'm not exactly sure what Galoy's vision is, but I guess they provide this service, not just hosted by themselves, but I mean, I can imagine they just sell it as a infrastructure, as a package. Anyone can run the Galoy infrastructure with the synthetic hedging, and provide the users, if they're a merchant or whatever, with synthetic stablecoin. So it's basically, we're pretty much just the same thing. We're the issuer of the stable sats, and we're not built on the Galoy stack, but what it does in backend is pretty much the same. And I mean, not sure whether that answered your question, but again, like this is anyone can really run this, and I think I would encourage as many people as possible to run it, because that so makes the system more robust.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that's exactly the idea. Like what we're thinking is that we don't want it to be a centralized thing. We don't want it to be like one single USDC token or some other token that has one issuer and is kind of like the final port of call. Like this, the idea behind this is to have the stability at the edges from a number of providers that stabilize their things in different ways. And then you just have Bitcoin in the middle, Lightning in the middle, so that you don't need to care what's happening at the edges. Your relationship is just with the edge. It doesn't have to be with the entire route. So yeah, like I think, yeah, what Kollider is doing is probably almost the same thing, synthetic USD with like shorts against a long position. But for our integration with them, for example, they use, I assume they use their exchange to do the synthetic USD on their end. But then because they're an exchange and they have liquidity, we can also use their liquidity to do ours. And the thing with our engine, the StableSats engine, is that it is all open source, and we do encourage people to take it and run it for themselves and plug it into whatever funding sources or hedging sources they want to plug it into, and provide that service for other people. Because yeah, I guess that's the model. The model is that once you have this sort of diversity of people providing this service, it becomes more resilient, and it's I guess less susceptible to attacks or like faults or rug pulls or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, that was my next question actually. As a developer, how could I make use or how could I start using StableSats from Galoy or Kollider? When do I need to go to? What can I find there? How does the onboarding work there?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so as a developer, right now, StableSat sits as its own separate module. It's being rewritten in Rust right now, and there's sort of three components to it. There's an accounting module where you keep track of the liabilities you're hedging. There's a hedging module that speaks to whatever hedging backend you're using, whether it's Kollider or OKX or whatever, and it's able to adjust the hedge positions. And then there's a wallet, like not quite module, but just like an interface where you hook it up to a wallet so that it can send Bitcoin back and forth to users or exchanges or whatever to be able to settle positions. So the state of it right now, so the way we've sort of thought of it is that it's this hedging engine that you can drop into an application to be able to execute hedges without having to recode everything for yourself. We sort of figured that out, and we're like, we're thinking it could be used for other people to do this as well. The current state of it right now is that we're sort of still untangling it from our backend and pulling it into its own separate repo. So some things are pretty modular, some things are not. The hedging stuff is pretty modular, so that's why we're seeing the first contribution, open source contribution, coming in on that front, which is the Kollider contribution, and that's been amazing work because I think it's Stefan a guy called Stefan who's doing it, and in doing the Kollider integration, it's also making it so that you're moving from like 1 to 2. So, having one thing is you can code it in a pretty sort of dependent way, but having two things means you have to make things more abstract, which is where a lot of the work is happening right now. So after 2 is done, the third one is going to be much simpler to sort of plug in. So the first point a developer can start to play with this is to plug in a third hedging source. Maybe it's DLCs, maybe it's another exchange, maybe it's, I don't know. But that's a point where you can interact with the system. And I guess if you want to take the entire StableSats engine and drop it in somewhere, right now it's not totally possible because we do use the Galoy backend for our accounting. So there's sort of a coupling there. But we do want to, one of the next things on the roadmap is to sort of remove that coupling and move the accounting into like inside of StableSats, so that it can kind of sit as its own module, and it would instead communicate through like sort of a quoting interface where it provides quotes and the user can accept quotes instead of it having to like store its accounting somewhere else. So that's sort of the next thing we'll be looking at to decouple it from our backend. And I mean, again, that's a point. if a developer thinks that, hey, I think I can use a hedging engine, this is kind of like pretty decently built out already, and there's, I guess, a few little things to do again. So if somebody wanted to, instead of rebuilding their own hedging engine, sort of contribute to helping decouple that accounting layer, that could be another point where developers can get involved as well. So that's pretty much it. StableSats-RS is a module on GitHub, written in Rust. But yeah, we would just encourage people to take a look at the code, and I guess we did a talk at Adopting Bitcoin recently that sort of explains the architecture of it as well. So it's
Yeah,
kind of all
we
there
should
for
make
people.
sure
Yeah.
that this is also linked in the show notes. That was a very good talk, I have to say. What about Konstantin, Collider? How can a developer? Is there some repository somewhere where I can go to as a developer?
Yeah. So what we did, we pretty much rewrote this. There's a sort of project which also Alby has rewritten in Go, which is called LND Hub, which is sort of a lightweight Lightning custodial wallet. Basically, you can give Lightning accounts to some users custodially. And what we did, basically, we created, I guess, also a very lightweight version of entire wallet and hedging service. So it is, the base of it is a rewrite of LND Hub in Rust. And then what we did, we kind of made it more modular than the original LND Hub. So what we created is like 3 microservices, which is an API, a bank, which is basically just an accounting system, and the dealer, which we kind of like name copied from Galoy, because initially the hedging service of Galoy was called Dealer. So it's like a dealing desk. If you think about a bank that has some sort of FX trading going on, and they have a dealing desk which they communicate with to do sort of their foreign currency transactions. Anyway, so that's how we think about it. So these 3 microservices sort of can work all individually. Obviously, only running the API doesn't make a lot of sense, because all you can do is create accounts. But running the bank and the API just gives you like basically LND Hub, a Bitcoin a Lightning custodial sort of like wallet. And then if you turn on the dealer, that will sort of enable synthetic accounts, which, depending on what's available on the exchange, will sort of make these accounts available. Like if Kollider, and this is right now, it's pretty much connecting only to the Kollider API. And it's currently euros and US dollars, but depending, like as we add more pairs to the exchange, the more sort of fiat currencies will come available. And I guess there's also where you see that where we have some sort of like flexibility, we can just add fiat currencies as we sort of like please, and as we have to get liquidity for those. So which makes us quite flexible on this end. But yeah, so it's called the project is called LND Hub X, which is found on our GitHub. Kollider HQ on GitHub, and it's super lightweight. You can compile it and pretty much run everything out of the box. Nothing really you have to like no like weird dependencies. Nothing. It's just a Rust binary that you run, and just should give you all the things you need to run it. And then we have some API docs at lndhubx.collider.xyz, which basically just documents the REST API to that. But yeah, everyone can just use it. All you have to do is you have to register on the exchange, on Kollider exchange, and then drop your API keys into the into your backend to be able to use the dealer. But yeah, so it's a very lightweight version, and there's still a lot of development going on in that. So yeah, very early days on that project.
Cool, perfect. Like coming a bit back to your like personal developer experience when it comes to Lightning. Arvin, you said you experimented a lot. Maybe you can share some experiences also with other like new developers in the space. What would you recommend them to? Where can they go to start learning about Lightning? Where do they find good resources?
So one of the first places, I think Ed knows this, there's a really great resource on VoltFund guide, like volt.fund/guide, I think. I think that was specifically written for developers who want to get on board with Lightning. So I contributed to some of that in the early days. And that was sort of a resource where it's taking these concepts and breaking it down in sort of a logical order of what developers would expect to need to learn if they're getting started with wrapping their heads around Lightning. So that's a good resource. Outside of that, I would say like how I did it is just to sort of look at project. Like there's a lot of open source code in this space. So it would be to maybe just choose one thing that you think is interesting. And just like look at how things are implemented. Maybe it's, you know, L&D Hub, maybe it's one of the wallets like Breeze or something. They're interesting. They have an entire L&D node inside there. Maybe you're a bit more advanced. Maybe you maybe you want to like understand the internals of Lightning. So LDK is interesting for that because they've sort of decomposed everything into separate pieces. So yeah, I mean, for me, like it was a lot simpler than that. I think I just started by literally running L&D, and when I started running it, rebalancing wasn't a thing yet. So it was, I don't think you could have even paid yourself as yet. So people were still contributing that code as well. But yeah, it's just like taking it, running it, trying to hook it up to very simple services. Maybe it's using the API on the gRPC interface on L&D to make a simple wallet interface where you can hit send or receive or something, or maybe you dump a transactional list out of it. Maybe you play with C Lightning, and they have some really interesting plugins. But it's just, I think the key is just to get started. Just choose one very specific, simple thing and dive in. And it doesn't have to be the right place. There is no right place. It's just choosing. It's just like taking that first step, because I think sometimes if you look at the space, there's so much happening. You just think, oh, I can never learn any of this. It's just too much. How will I ever catch up to any of this? I mean, that's not really possible, right? Even the developers who develop these things don't know everything happening in any space. So yeah, I would say if you're getting started, just choose something very specific, play with it as a user, and then start to look at the internals of it and try to replicate it or change it, edit it, whatever. Like, yeah, that's how I would do it.
Cool. Konstantin, can you add anything to that? Like, or also, how do you keep informed about the latest developments in the space?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I think, well, I would say like this is also sort of my approach. Just dig through other projects, see what they're doing, try to replicate stuff, run stuff, see how it works. I think it's best to just pick up a little project and start sort of making it happen, and then you kind of understand, how it works and what the problems are and so on. It's yeah, I think that's how sort of we go about it, or I go about it, building anything, and also how I sort of got into the Lightning stuff. Where I keep up to date, to be honest, I'm just I'm just following Lightning Lab on Twitter, see what's going on. Whenever there's a new version, obviously, I'll be on that. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I spend a lot of time on the UX, and sort of have handed off the responsibility of keeping our Lightning infrastructure in mint condition by handing it off to Kevin, our Lightning specialist. So at that moment, we don't do much on the core sort of like Lightning development side on the platform. Like our infrastructure is sort of like a point where I think it's quite solid. And now it's more about, hacking around UX mostly. And so that's what I spent most of my time with. But yeah, so this is, I guess, the general way, I keep up to date.
Assuming you had enough time a part of like Kollider, what would you like to hack on actually, that has to do something with Lightning and to try it out?
Yeah, I would like to get into more sort of the well, I would like to explore more like the sort of the non-custodial side of like the currents of derivative making derivatives work on Lightning with DLCs and stuff. So that is something I really want to look into soon. I have fiddled around with I can't remember what that project is called. The one that does allow you to have some credit CFD on Lightning. Can't remember, but anyway, so yeah, I would like
Itchy Sats. Is it Itchy Sats?
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I would like to hack around that, because I do think that sort of the way we'll go eventually. I have not looked into it enough to make sort of an informed decision of where it is at. But yeah, this is sort of what I want to do. I want to see where the how can this become more, the whole idea of like trading with Lightning, how can that become more non-custodial? So that's what I want to hack on.
Cool. Arvin, you actually are already hacking on another like side project for the Legends of Lightning tournament. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I can talk. I'm hacking on too many things right now. So I guess, yeah. Okay. So that project, it's sort of a UX experiment. Very simple. I sort of just threw it out as an idea, and it's not as much Lightning based as it is sort of user based, making sense of like a transaction history and price movements and like experiments in UX to sort of visualize things that otherwise would be in spreadsheets, visual cues and different ways to represent things. And the idea there is that how do you make these things more intuitive for an end user who doesn't maybe understand these things, understands like DCAing or like price fluctuations, tracking an average price across a bunch of different things, the effects of different spends and purchases at different times. It's sort of like, it's really a UX experiment and trying to abstract some of those things and make it, understandable for and maybe not as sophisticated end user. But I guess if I wanted to hack on something, if I had like a bunch of time to just spend hacking on things, I feel like there's not we haven't really explored what's possible with Lightning routing as yet, which I think is super interesting. Like we understand very simply, it's okay, you find a route, you send some payments from this side, it goes to that side. But there's a lot that you can do just in terms of like each hop in a route, how it passes a payment forward. There's this idea of interchange nodes. Can you like construct routes across systems? Can you construct a route across like Bitcoin and something like Liquid or something else? Can you construct a route where there's a synthetic thing in the middle and then it resolves back to Bitcoin? Like I feel like there's some really interesting things there, because Lightning, like we think of Lightning in terms of Bitcoin, but I think really any UTXO based system can use Lightning. It's not just a Bitcoin layer 2, it's an overlay network. So that I think is super interesting. If I had like unlimited space to explore something, that's what I would explore. Yeah.
Cool. Exciting. And do we have any questions from the audience?
It doesn't look like it at the moment. Seems to be pretty quiet Tuesday afternoon. So yeah, we can just keep chatting away between us. Or if there are any extra questions which you have, Moritz, we can obviously feel free. Yeah, I mean, Arvin was mentioning taking part in the tournament. I know Konstantin's been working on some Kollider stuff as well. I'd be interested to hear like what your guys, talking kind of like larger scope, meta kind of stuff. What your vision for sort of the Lightning ecosystem, or what point would you like things to get to in the next couple of years for people watching? Like, I think this might be interesting to look back on, but some of the stuff which has been sort of happening the last few weeks, some stress testing of the Lightning Network, things like this. A lot of people are talking about sort of building in terms of sort of innovation on the vertical stack with applications and stuff like that. What kind of, whether it's like an application or a tool or particularly just kind of maybe like a vision for the ecosystem, do you guys have where do you guys want to see things go? If you could rub a magic ball and Lightning turns into something overnight, where would you want it to get to? What's kind of the end goal for either yourself as makers kind of in the space, or maybe for the projects that you're working on, or just maybe the ecosystem as a whole? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think Lightning sort of has potential to just become, the de facto way of transferring value. But I would say it wouldn't necessarily matter what it is that you're transferring. I was saying it's pretty much, arbitrary, as long as obeys the system. There's so many applications, and especially like with sort of the current development in Taro and the ability to eventually maybe create arbitrary assets. It really doesn't matter what you transfer through Lightning. It's just you transfer something, which always can be Bitcoin, which can be value, but it doesn't necessarily have to. I'm amazing. I envision, I guess, or I hope that this Lightning is becoming sort of the de facto payments layer, and or just a layer to transfer value, and that if so that will sort of. I don't think it will be the only one, but I think it can be one of them, and so the possibility that in terms of like different application can be built on top of it is I guess increases by a lot when there is other like protocols that are unable to create other assets, and it's just means of communication that is used all across the world to build sort of financial applications. And I guess that's what we thinking or trying to do in Kollider is just to embrace it and see where we can take it in terms of what application we can build with Lightning, and sort of like see what technologies sort of are coming up that enhance the the scope of Lightning, and how we can utilize that. But yeah, I think it has a shot at becoming that de facto payments gateway, and which is obviously huge. Like that is one of the biggest things that the technology can do, is being a global payments network. But yeah, so this is what I sort of see the future happening to Lightning. And I do also think that it sees, like, if I were to like make a bet on what is actually being used right now for payments, and I would say actually Lightning is probably the currency that is used mostly for payments, given like all the other like DeFi protocols that exist that sort of want to build some sort of like circular economy, or like it being the way to transfer value. I think Bitcoin actually is the one that is being used for at least in a very small scale, but it is used to make purchases and like value transfer, and like a in the real world, really. So I think Bitcoin is ahead on that end. So I do believe that it's has a good shot at making it. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And Arvin, how about you?
Yeah, I think mine my stuff is pretty similar. I guess if assuming that all the there's still a lot of work to be done on the base layer, just in terms of improving scalability and privacy and reliability and all those things. But assuming those things get sorted out, then I think it's a very similar vision. It's like almost, it would be cool if Lightning became this sort of invisible substrate that you can move assets through. Like you can just throw anything at it and it pops out the other end somewhere. Which would take a lot of work. You'd have to represent things in a way that's Lightning native, and you have to improve sort of the things that exist inside of routes. Just for example, if I can trade a route a payment and it ends up being a trade as well, because one of my hops is an interchange node, that's pretty cool. Like, what else can you do with routes? What else can you do with nodes on a route? That's not just transferring. Like, I think that would be interesting, like to see applications working sort of at that. I think it's 2 points. It's what can you do that's interesting inside of routes, and then what can you do that's interesting at the edge of routes. I think those are two really great places to explore different kinds of applications. I think my internet is a bit spotty right now. I hope I'm not breaking up too much. But yeah,
we're fine. But these are really good, really, really cool visions there, and also leave a lot of ideas for developers who listen to jump in, experiment themselves. So Yeah, we are coming to an end of this session, actually, unfortunately. Maybe one final question: where can people, listeners, go and find you when they have questions?
I'm mostly on Telegram and Twitter, so probably Telegram is the way. So our Telegram group, Kollider, I think it's called Kollider Trade_trade, and yeah, on my Twitter, Discord, anywhere really.
Cool.
Yeah, I think for me, Twitter is easiest. Everything else just gets so noisy sometimes. But yeah, on Twitter, I'm VINDARD. And I guess for like more Galoy specific questions, we have chat.galoy.io, where it's a Mattermost instance where we can ask anything about stable sats and all sorts of different things. But yeah, I'd say those two: Twitter or that chat. Yeah.
Super cool. Thanks a lot for your time, Arvin, Konstantin. And I think we learned a lot, like what Kollider is about, Galoy is about, how you guys use stable sets and why you use them, and also how to get started as a developer using stable sets. I think you have, both of you have a pretty cool project that you're currently working on, and also shared quite some ideas with all of us, and a great vision of the Lightning Network. Yeah, to all the listeners, thanks for joining us today. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in this topic as well, and also feel free to let us know what topics you actually would like to see covered in the future episodes. So yeah, get in touch in the comments. Super cool. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks guys.
Fun.
Catch you soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.